Hi everybody and welcome once again to Ruby's Classic Cooking. And today I'm going to make English muffins. Now, let's dive right into this recipe. I don't know if they call them English muffins in your part of the world, but they're sort of like crumpets, but maybe not exactly like crumpets because I don't know that I've ever had a crumpet. So let's see if these are crumpets or not, but we call them English muffins here anyway. First thing I'm going to do is scald 2 cups of milk. Now you're going to go, scald, what the heck does that mean? And why do you do that? Well, first of all, I want to heat my milk up. Second of all, back in the good old days when these cookbooks were written, milk wasn't always pasteurized. So you wanted to scald your milk just to make sure that it was safe to use. Now what scalding is you take this and you heat your milk up. You can either put it in a pan on top of your stove, or I'm going to do this in the microwave. You heat your milk until little tiny bubbles start to form all down the sides here. You try to not heat it enough to have a scum on top of your milk, but you definitely want little bubbles all over everywhere. And that's just about at the point of the boil, but not boiling, because you don't want to boil your milk. So I'm going to put this in my microwave for 1.5 to 3 minutes. I have a 1100 watt microwave oven. So different powers of microwave, different amounts of time. So play with that if you use the microwave. And then make a note of it in your recipe so that you remember next time. So I'm going to be back. I'm going to scald this 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes in the microwave, and I'll be back to show you what it looks like. Okay, here I am back with my scalded milk. Now, you can see, if you can see that or not, but there's bubbles all through my milk and on top of my milk. See that? There's even a little scum on top of my milk, which I didn't really want, but anyway, that's the way it came out. So I'm just going to pour this over here into my bowl, and you can see all those bubbles and froth on top of my milk, and even that little bit of scum. So see, that's scalded milk. That's what it should look like. See how the bubbles are in there? Now into that bowl, I am now going to add 1/4 cup of shortening. This happens to be lard, but lard, shortening, whatever, so close enough. Same sort of deal. I used them interchangeably for years. Shortening, lard, whatever. Use what you got in the house. I'm going to add to that 1/4 cup of sugar, just plain old white sugar, in it goes. And a tablespoon of salt. Now, I don't usually use a whole tablespoon of salt in something, but that's what my recipe calls for. And I read it 2 or 3 times because I couldn't believe it was calling for that much salt. But that's what it says to do. Now I stir this until my shortening melts. This is a recipe you want to make when you've got lots of time, when you're going to be at home, or you're going to be at home for a while, because it's not quick. This is a slow recipe. Like a lot of bread, like most bread recipes, it just it needs to be taken care of when it needs to be taken care of, otherwise it wants you to ignore it. Anyway, this is all, the shortening is all dissolved. And now I'm supposed to set this to one side until it becomes lukewarm, because the next thing I'm going to add is a beaten egg, and you don't want to have scrambled eggs, so you got to wait till this cools off, otherwise your egg will cook when you don't want it to. And that's not what you want. Scrambled eggs, not what you want. So I may just beat my egg up right now while I'm waiting. I'll just do that. Smack my egg here. It says a lightly beaten egg. Well, here I have my egg in here. You just break it confidently into your bowl. And I'm just going to take my fork and give this a quick whisk up with my fork. You can go get your special fancy whisk out and beat it up, or you can get your electric beater or whatever you want to use, your egg beater to beat it up. But doing this with a fork, just give it a quick whisk with your fork from your drawer. That'll lightly beat up an egg anytime, every time. There you go. Back in the good old days when my mother and my mother-in-law were doing all their cooking for 5, 6 kids and everything, family, they didn't have a whole lot of specialty equipment. They used what they had in their drawer at home, and that's how I grew up cooking. Was what you use mostly. Most of the equipment you use is what you already have in the house. It's not specialized for cooking, except your good old wooden spoon and your spatula, your mixing bowls. You had basic tools. You didn't have a whole lot of fancy special equipment just for doing a certain task in the kitchen. You made do with what you had. Okay, and while we're waiting for this to cool off, I'm going to get my yeast rising. So I have here half a cup of lukewarm water, which just means you stick your finger in it, and if it feels about the right temperature, same temperature as your body, you got it right. And now I'm going to dissolve a teaspoon of sugar into my water, just like that. And you know what? You don't have to use a clean spoon every time you're doing this, because it's all going to end up in the same bowl, and it's all going to end up used in the same recipe. So if you use a spoon that's been used for a different part of your recipe, you don't have to dirty another thing to do this with. Okay, there's that. And now I'm going to add my yeast, which, since this is loose, I'm going to add about 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. Maybe more than 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. Well, about 2 teaspoons of yeast I'm going to add in here. This is bread making yeast. In fact, I'm just reusing this bottle that says yeast on it. This isn't actually what it is. It's actually regular ordinary yeast, bread making yeast, and not special bread machine yeast. This is special, just regular yeast. I just reduce, recycle, reuse. It's a yeast bottle. I use it for I've refilled it. So now I'm going to leave that sit for 10 minutes, and when I come back, this should be cool enough to add my next ingredients in, and the yeast will be ready to use. I'll be ready to add my egg to my bowl of this mixture over here, my milk and sugar mixture over here, and then we'll carry on with the English muffins. Okay, here we are back again, and here's my yeast growing and bubbling, and that is going to work very well in my mixture. Alright, well here's my yeast after 10 minutes, getting nice and bubbly and rising. And now on to the next step. This right here is getting to be nice and cool. I can just stick my finger in here. Yep, oh, nicely lukewarm. Perfect. And so now I'm going to stir my lightly beaten egg into that. Let's dump that in there. Give that a quick stir around. Now I'm going to give this a brisk stir with my fork. Everything all being lukewarm. Into this mixture goes my yeast. My yeast, my water, and my sugar are now in here with the rest of my ingredients. Give this a stir with my spoon. And now I'm going to start adding my flour. 3 1/4 cups. Don't worry, metric people, because when I write up this recipe, all the metric equivalents will be in the recipe down below. Now, when you're doing something like bread, and it says 3 1/4 cups of flour, you don't have to be really super precise, because what you're looking for is the final product. So this I'm going to stir with my spoon. You can also use an electric beater, it says, but I wouldn't bother, because you'd just be dirtying your electric beater, and you have to finish this off by hand anyway. So you just stir this in, and you're going to have a very slushy looking mixture that's easily stirred with your spoon. Very soft batter look here, and that's phase 1. There you go, see that? And now I'm going to add 3 1/2 more cups, 3 1/4, 3 1/2 more cups of flour. I'm just going to add my flour into this cup by cup, so that as I stir, I can take a break, or I can, judge how much more I need to add. Because these are kind of approximate amounts. Sometimes it can be a really damp day, sometimes it can be a really dry day, and it can make a difference how much flour your batter is going to need. As long as you know what you're looking for, then you're okay. But that's what I'm here to help you figure out what you need to look for. So let's add some more flour here. As you add more flour, it's going to get tougher and tougher to stir. So you don't want to add your other 3 1/4 cups of flour all at once, because then it will be really tough to stir. So I just add a cup, and then another cup, and then another cup. Make life easier for yourself. Anyway, okay. And periodically I just clean off my wooden spoon, because it doesn't get the flour absorbing into it properly. I'm going to end up with a big wet sticky patch of flour. a mixture on your dough on your spoon. So anyway. And at a certain point, I'm going to turn this out on my surface, and I'm going to start working the dough in. I'm going to start kneading it because it's going to get too tough for my spoon to really be effective. Besides which, your arm gets tired doing that. Okay, that's what all that flour works in here. So I'm going to put some on my board here. A little pile here. I turn my dough out on top of that. Make sure you clean everything out of your bowl that's in here because you need that flour in your bread and the rest of your dough. Clean it out as you go. Alrighty, now I'm going to put the rest of my flour on top. I kind of pre-measured it out into this bowl this time. Alright, so that's my 3 1/4 cups of flour here. And I'm just going to work that in here into my dough by gently kneading it as I go here. 8 to 10 minutes of kneading after I get this flour all mixed in here is what I want to do too. I'm not going to make you watch all of this, but you just kind of go, turn it a quarter, bring it around, use your hands, your palms flat on it, and just work it in like that. Gently rock it back and forth. Rock it back and forth. And that will, your flour, amazingly, will start to disappear. Which you're going to go, come on, that isn't real, is it? Yes, it is. That's how it works. Let's keep doing it. And as you do that, your dough is going to get a lot less sticky and it'll start to get smooth on top and take on a whole different appearance from what you started out with. And now it's starting to feel firmer now than it was. I've seen cooking shows where they start picking up their dough and slapping it on the counter and stuff, but I was never taught to do that. When I was kneading, this is how I was taught to knead. Get your arms, your shoulders, your elbows into it and press down onto your dough firmly. Using your hands. This is a great wrist strengthening exercise, by the way. And it builds your arms too. Okay, I've worked in the last of my dough here. So now I'm going to knead this for 8 to 10 minutes just by doing the same thing. Working it around a quarter circle and just kneading it like this. Have a little flour around to sprinkle on just in case your dough starts to stick while you're kneading it. So you can just make sure it's not sticking, that's all. Alright, here's what my dough looks like after about 8.5 to 9 minutes of kneading. And now I'm going to put this in a greased bowl. First I'm going to get some grease here, a little bit of oil. Just going to put a little canola oil in the bottom of my bowl. And I'm going to grease my bowl. And then I'm going to grease my bread, my dough, all around. And now I'm going to leave that to rise for an hour and a half. So you see what I mean? You have to be around to do this. But for the next hour and a half, you can do whatever you want. You can go play a computer game, talk on your phone, do something on your phone, vacuum, wash dishes, do laundry, whatever. Just as long as you remember to be back in an hour and a half to do the next step of the recipe. And I'll be back in an hour and a half and show you what it looks like. That's what it looks like right now in my bowl. We'll see what it looks like in an hour and a half. It should be much bigger than this. Hi everybody, I'm back again to start the next phase of the English muffins. Okay, now I forgot to mention that you cover your dough with a damp tea towel before you leave it to rise for an hour and a half. So, now let's have a look at our dough. Looks a little different now than it did an hour and a half ago, doesn't it? Okay, now I'm going to turn it out here on my board. First I have to punch it down. Make sure you knock the air out of it really well. Give it a good punch down here. And there you go, all punched down. And now turn it out onto your, I'm using my pastry board, but you don't have to do that. If you don't have one, don't worry about it. Now I'm going to divide this into 3 pieces of dough, about roughly equal in size. And I'm going to roll those out to 1/4 inch of thickness. But first, as I say, I'm going to take my cookie sheet over here and I'm going to sprinkle a layer of cornmeal. First, I'm going to sprinkle a layer of cornmeal on top of my cookie sheet. Okay, here's my layer of cornmeal on my cookie sheet. And now, I take my rolling pin, roll this out to 1/4 inch thickness. Maybe I need to tilt this down because you can't really see what I'm doing, can you? All right, let me tilt down my camera. Okay, now I'm going to roll this out to 1/4 inch thickness. Okay, that looks about right. And now I have a 3-inch biscuit cutter here, nice 3-inch round circle, and I'm going to cut my English muffins out of this. Now, they may not be completely round when I'm done, but this isn't a commercial kitchen, so I'm not going to worry about it. It still tastes the same, right? And now I'm going to put these on top of my cornmeal. Oops. Place them right on top of my cornmeal. I have a feeling that most of my English muffins are going to turn out to be rather oval and not round, but they'll still taste the same, right? And once that's accomplished, then you should have about 3½ dozen English muffins ready to go. Now you cover these, it says, with greased wax paper, but probably I'll just put some plastic wrap over them and cover that with a damp tea towel, and then you leave them to rise again until they are doubled in bulk, which will probably be about an hour, I would say. Then you get out your griddle and you start cooking them off. I'll be back when it's time to start, when they're doubled, and time to start cooking them off. I'll be back in about an hour. Hi everyone, and now for the final step. My English muffins have been sitting here on the cookie sheet with cornmeal on them, and now I'm going to cook them. I'm heating up my frying pan, which they say to use a griddle, but my cast iron frying pan I think will do the job nicely. And they've been sitting here for an hour, and see, they look nicely doubled, don't they? So I'm going to start cooking them 6 minutes to a side, and we'll see what happens then. All right. My English muffins aren't perfectly round, but they're homemade. So. Okay, well, I'll be back when I finish cooking all 3½ dozen of these things. But you get the idea. I hope you enjoyed watching my video today, and I hope you'll like, subscribe, and make some comments and try this recipe out. I hope your English muffins turn out really golden and delicious. So come back and see me next time and see what I'm cooking in my kitchen next time on Ruby's Classic Cooking. Bye for now.